Have you ever noticed that air conditioners don't work in winter? It was summer in Chicago, and it was so hot that you could light a cigarette just by sticking it out the window. The small air conditioner that was in my office gave up 2 days earlier with a death rattle and groan. I could literally feel the sweat dripping from my armpits. I would have preferred to be sitting on a stool at Plato's place sipping a cool drink, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I couldn't leave. I was waiting for my hour-long appointment and could not miss the opportunity to look at the lady who was going to visit me. Last time I heard such a sultry voice. I didn't even recognize her name. She hung up without calling him. All I knew was that her husband was missing. I heard the click of her high heels in the hallway and saw her shadow as she stopped to read the black lettering on the frosted glass of my door. Blake McDaniels, private investigation. I quickly buttoned the top button of my shirt and adjusted my tie as the door opened. I've seen a lot of beautiful women in my time, but this one was straight out of Vogue or Vanity Fair. I'm 6 feet 2 inches tall, and she looked only 4 or 5 inches shorter. Her long blonde hair was professionally styled and framed a gorgeous face with high cheekbones and sparkling blue eyes that could devour a man's soul like a Doberman pines a piece of raw meat. The expensive women's suit she wore did little to hide the body it covered, and the longest legs I had ever seen were hidden in a short skirt to hide treasures a man would kill for. Standing up, I extended my hand as she crossed the 3 meters between the door and my desk on the other side of the room. Blake McDaniels, I introduced myself. Mrs. Richardson, she answered, sitting down in the chair opposite my desk and crossing her long legs. Mrs. Arthur Richardson. I saw how amused she was by the shock on my face. Yes, that's right, Mr. McDaniels, the same Arthur Richardson who made a fool of you a couple of years ago. She wasn't joking. Her husband was embezzling funds from his company. His business partner knew about it, but couldn't prove it, so he hired me. I ran a scam on Richardson that got him going and caught him in the cookie jar. He was charged and went to court, where everyone thought he was convicted. Unfortunately, he hired a clever out-of-town swindler who discredited me, the main witness, and Richardson got off. This was not only bad for my ego, but also bad for business. It took me over a year to come to terms with this. I have to say, Mr. McDaniels, you are exactly what I imagined a private detective to be. Oh, and what is this? Tall, well-built, a little intimidating. That nose looks like it has been broken more than once, and the scar above your left eye and the other on your cheek indicate that you do not accept anyone's favors. I had to grin. She figured me out well. So, Mrs. Richardson, how can I help you? I'm offering you the opportunity to balance the scales, Mr. McDaniels. Somehow Art found out that I was going to divorce him and left for parts unknown. He doesn't care about me, but divorce will cost him dearly financially, and he knows it. My ears stood on end when she mentioned that this idiot costs money. How long was he gone? A little over a month. Have you contacted the police? Yes. They forced me to write a missing person report, but they didn't seem too interested in it. Like me, they believe that he is somewhere playing house with his girlfriend. They showed me how to download something onto my phone. They said it would show me the location of his phone once he used it, but nothing ever showed up. I know you don't take infidelity cases, but you do take missing persons cases, so here's my offer. I'll pay you $20,000 plus the cost of finding my husband, and a bonus of $50,000 if you do. At the same time, you will find evidence of his betrayal of me. Do you suspect him of treason? Oh, I know he's cheating. He has at least 2 mistresses, and I am sure that he is already cohabiting with one of them. From which one? I don't know and I don't care. I just want him to be found so I can get him to serve. I reached over and pulled out a contract from the bottom drawer of my desk and filled it out to reflect her offer. $20,000 to find her hubby, another $50 if I got proof of infidelity, and a $5,000 fee to get started. She signed without even reading. I don't have all $5,000 with me, she said, taking money out of her purse. But I'll ask someone to give it to you tomorrow afternoon, if you don't mind. I accept checks, I told her. I want you to start right now. I wouldn't want you to have to wait for the check to clear, she explained. I took $3,000 in cash and gave her the receipt, then spent the next hour asking questions. Does he have friends or relatives he could stay with? How much cash did he take? Does she know where he might have more money? Did he own property out of state? Did he drive his own car? She told me his driver's license number and all the credit card, social security, and bank account numbers she knew about. But she suspected he had others she didn't know about. She knew nothing about his business dealings or his partners. I knew that he was forced to leave the company where he committed theft, but I did not follow him after the trial. As Mrs. Richardson left my office, I watched her ass sway from side to side and didn't notice any panties under her tight skirt. Damn, she's been sitting here without any panties this whole time. I wondered if it was because of the heat, or if she was trying to use her feminine charms as an incentive to take her case. If so, then she needn't have worried. I was going to hand him those papers myself when I found him, just to see the look on that bastard's face. Without interrupting my work, I was doing something else. Our state's lieutenant governor was just as crooked as anyone else. A couple of months before, I received anonymous information about a real estate scheme in which he was involved. A little preliminary investigation convinced me that the tip was legitimate. I hate dirty cops and politicians, but I had to be extremely careful. I was playing in the big boy's sandbox. If I had shown my hand before receiving the evidence, I could have lost my license and possibly ended up in jail myself. No thanks. A missing persons case will allow me to take my mind off things a bit and also allow my scent to disappear. If someone from the office, vice governor, will be snooping around. Besides, I owed Richardson. Once he made a monkey out of me, it's time to return the favor. I sat down at the computer and started putting together a summary using the information I received from my wife, but I got nowhere. I didn't think it would be easy. The asshole was smart. I made the mistake of underestimating him once, and I wasn't going to do it again. I needed a starting point, some kind of clue. I would take whatever I could get. Where better to start than at the end? It had been 2 years since I had been in the office of Richardson and Walker Industrial Lighting, although it was now just Walker Industrial Lighting. I could tell from the look on her face that his secretary recognized me when I entered. I took out a business card. I know who you are, Mr. McDaniels, but I don't see your name on Mr. Walker's appointment calendar, and, frankly, I don't expect to see it there in the future. I can't say I was surprised by this reception. Listen, doll, just tell him that I know a way to get revenge on our common sworn enemy. She just looked at me for a few seconds. Go sit over there, she ordered. I'll see if he can talk to you. Not knowing how long he would keep me waiting, or whether he would even see me, I sat down in the chair and reached for the magazine. I barely had time to open it when I heard his door open on the other side of the room. I looked up and saw him standing there, frowning. What's the matter, McDaniels? Did you give our money back? No, I answered. Most likely they are gone forever, but with your help we can take a little revenge. He turned and retreated to his office, but left the door open. I took this as an invitation. Upon entering, I sat down in a chair, and he, with the same gloomy expression on his face, sat at his desk. I don't even know why I'm listening to you. The last time I did this, you assured me that the company would return the money that asshole embezzled. Not only did we not get the money back, but I had to pay your fee as well, so say what you want to say, and it better be good, or I might have security throw your ass out the window. I knew he was pissed, but come on. As far as I know, they didn't even have security. However, I didn't intend to annoy him. I hoped that he could give me a lead. After telling him that Richardson's wife had hired me to find him, I explained to him the reason. I hope to serve him the divorce papers myself, I told him. When this happens, you can always say that they were obtained with your help. I didn't expect it, but it brought a small smile to his face. What do you want from me? Everything you can know about his habits when he worked here, the people he knew, the places he went to get away from it all. Anything you can think of that might help me find him, maybe. A small hiding place where he took his women. His wife thinks he has a girlfriend but doesn't know who it might be, I said. Damn, guys like that go through mistresses like an alligator through a swamp, he said. I know about 2 women with whom he had fun then, but that was 2 years ago. Who knows how many girlfriends he's had since then? Anything you can think of? I repeated. An old girlfriend might know his new girlfriend. You know what they say about a woman who is despised? He reached for the intercom button. Dory, could you come in here for a minute? A few seconds later, Walker's pretty secretary stood at his desk and smiled at him, looking at me. Damn, she was good at this. I bet she was one hell of an attractive Friday girl, not to mention a tigress in bed. I wondered if Walker knew about both. Dory, you interacted more with the two women Richardson dated than I did. Do you remember their names? I have their names, addresses, and telephone numbers. Mr. Walker. We both looked at her in shock. He asked me to send them flowers. I have their data on my computer. He also made me dial their numbers for him before he picked up the phone. I just stumbled upon the mother lode. Inspired, I began to achieve more. What about a secret love nest where he would put his honey at night and where his wife would never be able to find them? Sorry, she said sarcastically. I don't know such a place. Dory, you can print out everything you have on these two women and anything else that you think might help in finding Richardson. He's missing, and we're going to help McDaniels find him. She looked at her boss with an expression that said, I'll do it, but I don't like it. She turned and walked back to her desk. Walker turned his attention back to me. Okay, Dory will make a printout for you. Leave her your business card in case she comes up with something else. You know I'm only doing this because I want to see Richardson suffer, right? Don't think I think you're anything more than an asshole. I stood up without shaking hands with him and joined Dory at her table. She was already holding the printout. This is all I have, she said, handing me a piece of paper. Rummaging in the pocket of my sports jacket, I pulled out the very business card that she had not accepted when I first entered. Your boss said I should give this to you in case you find something else, I said, placing it on the table. I felt pretty good. At least I had a lead, maybe two. When I left the air-conditioned building, the heat outside hit me like a blast furnace. I was already thinking about stopping by Platon's when I got an uneasy feeling that I was being watched. If 20 years as a private investigator has taught me anything, it's that you should never ignore your intuition. Lighting up a cigarette, I looked around carefully. I didn't see any suspicious characters, at least not any more than you usually see in downtown Chicago. But I couldn't shake the feeling. If I was being followed, the last thing I wanted to do was lead them straight to my only two leads. I decided to return to my office. When I entered, the first thing I did was take off my jacket and shoulder holster. Taking my Beretta, I placed it in the top drawer of my desk, then went to the top drawer of my file cabinet and grabbed a bottle of Dewar's White Label and a glass. I needed to think. I only had two cases, Richardson and the lieutenant governor. And then it dawned on me. Of course, if I was hiding from someone, I would want to know what they were doing to find me. Richardson kept an eye on his wife. Thus, he was always one step ahead of her. Damn, he was a smart Special Forces soldier. I looked around my office. Could he have listened to it while I was away? At that moment, I decided that paranoia was my friend. I put everything back on and left my glass of Dewar's on the table as I left the office. Then he went around the corner to a small diner to get something to eat. When I finished, I walked into the back room, past the men's room sign, and out the back door. Returning to the car, I drove to a little-known electronics store. Angie for short, has always been my ace in the hole. He heard the little bell above the door as I entered and came out of the back room to greet me. Hey, Blake, what's wrong? Hey, Angie, have you ever felt like you were being watched? He laughed. Not in my business. I took out my phone and placed it on the counter in front of him. Could you scan this for me? I think I'm being followed. They might also be bugging my office. I'm not sure. Angie connected my phone to the computer and checked it. Phone is fine, Blake. Good news, I told myself. Okay, thank you. Can you come to my office sometime and scan it? Yes, of course, he said, looking at the clock on the wall. I can leave here in an hour. That would be great, Angie, thank you. I will be there. This wasn't the first time he checked my office for bugs. We had a normal routine. He said he was nearby and came by to say hello. We carried on a normal conversation while he scanned the room. That way, if he found the bug, we wouldn't alert whoever left it. Of course, he found it 15 minutes later. It was very professionally installed into the rail of my Venetian blinds. Whoever Richardson hired was no amateur. We left the bug in place. "Come on, Angie, I'll take you downstairs," I said, in the interest of our spy. Once in the corridor and out of range of the listening device, I called my client. She answered on the third ring. "It was fast. I left your office just a few hours ago." "Well, I have good news and bad news, Mrs. Richardson." I heard her sigh. "Okay, tell me the good news first." "I have 2 promising leads," I told her. "It's good news." "What's the bad news?" "Your husband is watching you." "What? How do you know?" In this business, sometimes some kind of sixth sense develops. Mine told me that I was being followed today. On a whim, I checked my office for listening devices and found one. "How do you know that this is art? Maybe it's from one of your other cases?" "Think about it, Mrs. Richardson. What better way to prevent you from finding him than to know your every move?" "That sneaky asshole," she growled. "Your husband is not a fool, that's for sure." "Either way, we can use this to our advantage." "How?" I explained my plan, but it was already late, and we decided to wait until the next day. At 10 o'clock the next morning, she burst into my office. "Why didn't you tell me that you were the same private detective who created all the problems a couple of years ago?" she shouted. I calmly handed her the phone with a note in which I wrote that she should use it in the future if she needed to call me. She nodded her head to acknowledge that she understood and placed the rest of the fee on my desk before continuing. "If I had known who you were, I would never have hired you." "Well, I'm going to fix that right now." Fired. "Wait a minute," I begged, but she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her, almost breaking the glass. "Damn," I said out loud, leaning back in my chair with a big smile. I didn't like Derek Knutson. He was a private asshole. I use this term specifically for him because he gave private detectives a bad name. Mrs. Richardson was on her way to his office, where she would give him a fake name and write all sorts of nonsense. After wasting a little of his time, she will flash her pretty blue eyes at him and leave, leaving him to wonder what it was. Of course, someone who followed her would think that she fired me and hired him. Like a tick on a dog, they will focus all their efforts on Knutson and leave me alone. I still needed to give her some time to make sure my plan would work. So I ran to do some chores around the house and then stopped by Plato's place for a couple drinks. Stan, my favorite bartender, saw me walk in and was already waiting with a frosty mic by the time I sat down. We have known each other for a long time. He even dated my ex-wife for some time. We shot for a couple of minutes until he minded his own business and went to work. I was left thinking about my new business. A common battle cry in my profession is, follow the money. Unfortunately, I tried this 2 years ago and got nowhere. Richardson was the best I've ever seen at burying dead presidents. The fact is that everyone has a weakness, some kind of vice that makes him vulnerable. From what I knew of Richardson, his vice was women. Instead of trying to go after money again, I decided it would be better to spend my time looking for signs of broken hearts. As I told Walker, you know what they say about a woman being scorned. By the way, about this, I was wondering what Stacy was doing. 40 minutes later, I found myself ringing her doorbell. The door opened, and on the other side stood an absolute vision of female attractiveness. With her natural red hair and sparkling green eyes, Stacy stood out in any crowd. The black bodycon dress and high heels showed off a figure that could rival any supermodel. Hell, if you weren't my ex-wife, I'd get down on one knee and propose right now. She giggled. Excuses, excuses. Sorry, Stace, I should have called. I didn't know you were on a date. Yes, she said, opening the door a little wider. Come in, I just need to grab my purse. Going inside, I looked around for her companion, but saw no one. I don't want to interfere, Stace. I'll leave. You can't do it without me. She stood and looked at me with a purse in her hand. Have you decided where we will go yet? I was completely confused. I don't understand. You are dressed so smartly. Don't you have a date? I dressed up for you, you big fool. Now let's go, I'm hungry. Taking her arm, we walked to my car. I kept asking myself, how the hell did she know I was coming? I'm a detective. My job is to solve mysteries, and I won't be able to sleep until I solve this one. I waited until we were in the car before asking, "Stacy, how the hell did you know I was coming?" "Telepathy," she answered. "Telepathy?" "Yes, I wanted to go somewhere tonight, and I transmitted this thought to space. This only works for people in your spiritual orbit, so I knew you would be the one to receive my thoughts." Okay, I knew she had just said all this psychobabble, which meant she wasn't going to tell me about it, so I'd have to figure it out myself. "Yes, exactly," I said, which made my beautiful passenger laugh. By the time it dawned on me, we had already placed our order. Oh, of course, I mentioned this to Stan when I left Plato. He called you. She didn't say anything, just smiled widely. Every time Stacy and I got together, we could count on sex to be part of the equation. We both got horny as hell just being in each other's company. By the time we got back to her apartment, we were tearing off our clothes. "Will you stay the night?" "If this is an invitation, then I accept," I replied. "Okay, I'll give you 20 minutes to recover. And then, I want you to make love to me," she said, kissing my neck. "Keep up the good work and you won't need 20 minutes. She smiled. "Since when do you need an invitation?" It was about 2 o'clock in the morning when we both ran out of gas. Stacy curled up in my arms as we drifted off to sleep. I was in that twilight zone just before sleep takes over you when I heard her mutter, "I love you, Blake." As I expected, the bug in my office was gone by the next morning. Presumably, it was hidden in some cozy place in Knutson's office. I wished I had time to enjoy my cleverness, but if Richardson was as smart as I thought, my little trick couldn't fool him forever, so I had to act. I had 2 names, Janet Stenson and Kathy Heyer. I've thoroughly tested both of them. From their driver's licenses, I could tell that Stenson had moved to a more upscale neighborhood than before. I found their Facebook pages, studied their faces so I knew them by sight, and wrote down everything else I thought might be helpful. Based on their social media pages, it looks like Heyer has moved too. I saw a couple of guys she seemed friendly with, but Janet Stenson didn't mention anyone with a Y chromosome. That, and the fact that she moved into a fancier apartment, made me wonder if she was dating Richardson. It was certainly worth taking a short trip to see what I could find out. I picked up the small digital voice recorder and put it in my pocket. They can come in handy in a variety of situations. I figured that anyone who contacted Richardson when I was trying to take him down knew who I was. So there was no reason to play vacuum cleaner salesman when Stenson rang the bell. It took her a few seconds to recognize me after she opened the door. "What do you need?" "Miss Stenson," I greeted with a nod. "May I come in?" There were several options for the development of events. If she didn't know anything or wasn't dating Richardson again, she'd likely say no and close the door. If she was still with him and knew that his wife looking for his, then one of 2 things will happen. If she is not too smart, she will slam the door in my face. If she is smarter, she will invite me in and try to pump information out of me that she can pass on to her boyfriend. "Yes, of course, come in," she answered, standing to the side. I didn't see anything about her work when I looked for her. Whoever her sugar daddy was had money. The apartment was a good size, with fairly expensive furniture. A good place. "Thank you," she replied sharply. "So, for what reason did you want to see me?" I glanced at the leather sofa. "Can I sit down?" She sighed impatiently. "Perhaps," she conceded. I walked over and sat down. On the coffee table, I noticed her phone. What I wouldn't give to look at it, but I couldn't figure out how to get her out of the room for that long. "Miss Stenson, may I call you Janet?" "Yes, okay, haha." She suddenly became more friendly. She was going to pump information out of me, but next to me, she was just an amateur. "Janet, Arthur Richardson is missing. His wife is worried sick and hired me to find him. Can I offer you a beer?" She interrupted. This surprised me a little. I figured she needed time to think about her strategy, or maybe she thought the beer would loosen my tongue so she could get more out of me. Either way, it will give me an opportunity. "That would be great, thank you." As soon as she disappeared into the kitchen, I took the recorder out of my pocket, turned it on, and stuck it under the sofa. It was voice-controlled and only recorded someone's conversation. I hoped she would call Richardson as soon as I left. I had one more trick up my sleeve. She quickly returned with a beer. She placed a leather coaster on the glass coffee table in front of me and placed a bottle of Michelob on it. "I don't know how I can help, Mr. McDaniels. Art was my friend, but I haven't seen him in years. His wife must be furious. Do you have any leads?" "Not yet. I was hoping that you could help me. Let's be honest, Janet. You were much more than just a friend. With all his money, I doubt a man like Richardson would take a risk using hotel rooms. I think he has a nice little hideout for after-school activities, somewhere out of the way where no one will see him." "So, you don't suspect that he was kidnapped or anything like that? Do you think he is hiding from his wife on purpose?" "At the moment, I am not ruling out anything, but I would really like to find his love nest. If it is not there, it may indicate foul play." "And what will happen if you find him?" "His wife is not a fool, Janet. If he is cohabiting with someone, let it be as it is. She just wants to make sure he's okay." "Yeah," she said, letting me know that she knew I was lying. "Tell me, Mr. McDaniels, why did she hire you?" "There are probably 100 private investigators in Chicago." "Janet, even though your boyfriend's expensive lawyer pulled him out, I actually got information on him. I'm good at my job. I think Mrs. Richardson understands this." "I understand," she admitted. "I wish I could help you, but like I said, I haven't seen Art in years, and we've never been in any kind of love nest together." I was surprised that the mistress of a man like Richardson couldn't lie better, but I knew that was the cue for me. I took a sip of beer, stood up, and put my business card on the table. "Well, if you can think of something..." "I'll definitely call you," she said, finishing the sentence for me. She walked me to the door, said goodbye, and closed the door. I knew her next move would be to call Richardson. The phone I saw was not supposed to be in a luxury apartment. It was a cheap pipe. When I first arrived and parked my car on the street, I noticed that the apartment building had a parking lot on the lower level, with a large roll-up gate. I saw one of the residents use the automatic garage door opener when he drove inside. I'm willing to bet that in such a stylish establishment, each resident has a designated parking space. All I had to do was get inside. To do this, I opened the trunk and took out Captain America's magic Dakota ring. Okay, it wasn't a ring, and it had nothing to do with Captain America, but that's what I thought of it. In fact, it was about the same size as a pack of cigarettes. Most of the houses in this area had pretty good door locks. Not that I couldn't pick them, but it could take a long time. They also had built-in garages with automatic overhead door openers operating on radio frequencies. Most people rarely locked the attached door, so once they entered the garage, they could simply walk into the house. I bought my little gadget a few years earlier at Angie's electronics store. All I had to do was press a button when someone used the garage door opener, and my little toy would recognize the frequency and duplicate it. After that, I could use it to move in and out of the garage at any time. All I could do was wait outside Janet's house until one of the residents came home. It could have lasted for hours, but I was lucky. 10 minutes after I left her apartment, a Beamer pulled up. When I pressed the button, I saw the red light turn on, indicating that it was working. I waited a few minutes before going inside, then closed the door behind me. I was right about the parking spaces. It only took me a minute to find Janet's place. "Jesus," I said out loud. "Mercedes Cabriolet convertible. She must be something special in bed." Now all I had to do was find a place under the car where there was enough metal to hold the magnetic tracking device when driving over potholes. On a whim, I tried to open the door, and, to my shock, it opened. Stupid woman. I reached under the seat and attached the device to the inside of the frame. Once again, it was a waiting game. My tracking receiver would alert me as soon as Janet's car started moving. So to avoid appearing suspicious, I drove around the block a few times before finding another parking spot and waiting again. Night fell a few hours ago, and I was beginning to think that I would have to spend the night in the car when I heard my radio start beeping. I pulled out to follow her and saw her taillights as she drove away. I followed her to a grocery store a few blocks from her house. Taking out my binoculars, I watched as she entered the well-lit building. I saw her take one of the large carts, which I assumed meant she would be there for a while. This was my opportunity to return the recorder. I hurried back to the apartment building, used my magic decoder ring to enter through the garage, and took the elevator up to the second floor. Household locks are not easy to pick, but the locks that developers buy for apartment buildings are child's play. Taking a master key and a torsion spring from my pocket, I found myself inside her apartment in less than 20 seconds. Without wasting any time, I took out the recorder and quickly returned to the car. Several recordings were recorded, but most lasted only a few seconds. I figured she was talking to herself when she was alone. However, the first recording lasted just over 8 minutes. I knew that this would only be one side of the conversation, but I hoped for a miracle and almost got it.